Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Pariyantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Good. Be seated, please. Okay. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karava Vahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Very good. Welcome back. Welcome also to our many students attending this class regularly online. We continue our study of Uddhava Gita. We began the 15th chapter, and in this chapter we're in the midst of an interesting discussion where Sri Krishna is talking about karma yoga, jnana, and bhakti. And our discussion in last week's class was specifically on how this teaching really shows adhikari bheda, the principle of different teachings for different people. As you've heard me say many times, one size doesn't fit all. By the way, when you go to the mall and you see that sign, one size fits all, does it really? You can put anything on a sign, doesn't mean it's true. And that certainly applies to religious and spiritual practices. One practice doesn't suit all. So Sri Krishna introduced these three practices: karma yoga, jnana, pursuit of spiritual wisdom, and bhakti, devotion. In today's class, he's going to make an interesting distinction amongst these three, and a distinction that you won't find in the Bhagavad Gita. You know, if you want to, if you think that Sri Krishna should be perfectly consistent, whatever he says in the Bhagavad Gita should be perfectly reflected when his teachings are recorded in the Bhagavata Purana. If you think there should be perfect consistency, tell me, who has perfect consistency? What teacher, what person, what human being, or what divine being for that matter, is perfectly consistent? To me, that it's little evidence of some rigidity if we are looking for perfect consistency. After all, should we be looking for perfect consistency, or should we be looking for spiritual teachings that will help us? Pretty obvious, right? So the point here is that what we're going to see today is not the same as what he taught in the Bhagavad Gita. And if you are fixated on this consistency, it'll throw you off and cause problems. So that's why this kind of interesting point I'm making right now, and that is our focus need not be on consistency. That's not the point. The point is to find what is valuable in guiding us on our path of spiritual growth. So, Sri Krishna here then is the distinction he is going to make. We'll see the verse in just a moment. But the distinction he is going to make is that we said karma yoga, jnana, and bhakti. these three are not all at the same level, so to speak. And what he does is unique to the Bhagavata Purana. You won't find this in the Bhagavad Gita. By the way, don't try to get into this which one is right thing. Is the Gita right or is this? Again, it's that same consistency problem. Okay. So what he's going to show in today's verses is that karma, jnana and bhakti are at an upper tier, so to speak, and karma yoga is considered preparation for both. Karma yoga prepares you for jnana, which shouldn't surprise you based on a lot of our other discussions. But in the same way, karma yoga prepares you for bhakti. That you may, unless you've studied this before, you may not have seen that connection before Sri Krishna is going to present. Karma yoga as preparation for both jnana and bhakti. We'll see that right now. All right. Swadharmasto yajan yajñar, Swadharmasto yajan yajñar, Nashih kama Uddhava, Nashih kama Uddhava, Nayati swarga narakau, Nayati swarga narakau, Yad yan samacharet, Yad yananna samacharet, Yadi anyat na samacharet. Breaking the words apart in that last line. Go back up at the top. So talking about the karma yogi. Who is a karma yogi? One who is swadharmastaha, one who is established in fulfilling one's own responsibilities. But also one who is yajan, yajñaihi, who is yajan, worshiping Ishvara. How? Yajñaihi, through ritual sacrifice. Now here's the important point though. He says that this, he says in the second line, O Uddhava, this person, this karma yogi, is one who is na ashi kamaha. Na, not. Ashi here means often hope, but in this context, desire. So no desire for kama. Kama here is the object that you want. So there is no desire for objects of enjoyment. He's defining karma yoga here. And this definition, of course, is not different than what you find in the Bhagavad Gita. In the Gita, we find so many different definitions of karma yoga because, as we said, it's not one thing. It's a whole collection of attitudes, a whole collection of teachings which transform your ordinary actions into spiritual practice. It's not one thing, but many ways in which you can transform ordinary action into spiritual practice. And this is definitely one of them. Often in general, it's called nishkama karma, to do actions not for the sake of the results. So, nishkama karma, to act as part of a life of spiritual growth and not to act for the sake of a specific result. For example, the two terms he gives in the first line, swadharmastaha. One might be established in performing one's own duties and yet not be a karma yogi at all. How is that possible? Someone who performs one's own duties because if they don't, they'll get in so much trouble, right? Like at work, if you don't do what your boss expects you to do, then you'll get in trouble. Or at work, you meticulously perform all your duties so that you might get a promotion as a result. So my point is, merely, and you've heard me say this before, merely performing your duties, even meticulously, is not karma yoga. It depends on your attitude. It depends on your intention. And here Sri Krishna in the second line says that the intention, actually he says what the intention is not. The intention is not kama. The intention is not to fulfill some particular desire. Nishkama karma. Also, even in the case of yajanyajnaihi, when you perform a ritual, these are the two things he's talking about in this verse. One is being a karma yogi, is established in his or her responsibilities, and also continues to perform ritual worship as well. But ritual worship is so often done with a particular purpose in mind. The example that commentators love to give is putra kameshti, rituals that are done for the sake of getting the birth of a son. That's a very specific desire. Do you know, the same kinds of rituals can be performed without a specific desire that is meant to be fulfilled. A good example are rituals that are done for loka kalyana, for the blessings of everyone in the world. That's not for the sake of a specific, it's not for you to fulfill a specific desire, but rather it's to invoke Ishvara's blessings for everyone in all situations. So that's one example of doing a ritual without a specific purpose. Without, I won't say purpose is not correct. With not being for the sake of fulfilling a particular desire. Let's get the words right. Or another example is someone who's really a karma yogi who does the ritual. Why? If the karma yogi, this applies more in ancient times, if the karma yogi is the son of a pious brahmana who taught him to do, and the father taught the son to do all of these rituals, then the son feels that these rituals are supposed to be done. Not for the sake of fulfilling a particular... Not for the sake of pleasing the father. If I don't do them, what will dad think? Pitaji, you would say. So that oftentimes there's a fear of father's authority. But suppose the son just does the rituals because they're expected, they're supposed to be done. So without fulfilling any particular desire at all, those rituals are done. These are ways of understanding the behavior of a karma yogi. So again, actually not again, just to make a slightly different point. Karma yoga, and this nice, helpful definition. Karma yoga is not what you do. It's the attitude with which you do something. Or better yet, the intent with which you do something. Karma yoga is not what you do, but it has everything to do with the intention. If you have the intention of a karma yogi, washing your dishes at home is karma yoga. Going to work is karma yoga. Everything. Taking care of your family, obviously karma yoga. It's a transformation of ordinary activities into spiritual practice by a shift of attitude, or better yet, a shift of your intention. Okay, so with that in mind, we'll continue. Go down to the last line. Yadi anyat na samacharet. This also goes along with the first half. And if assuming that this person, this karma yogi, na samacharet, doesn't do anything, yadi anyat, anything else other than swadharma and rituals. That's all the person does. By the way, that pretty much sums it up, right? What should you do in life? Swadharma. And if you want to do something more, then do some kind of prayer, worship. And this is a mature life, a spiritual life. So it says, yadi anyat na samacharet, and you're not doing anything other than then what is the consequence? Sri Krishna says something interesting here. He says, na yati, that person doesn't go swarga narakao, to heaven or hell. Well, hell is kind of obvious. If the person is living a pious life, obviously they won't go to hell. But he says, they won't go to heaven. Won't go to heaven? What's so good about going to heaven? Sorry to be a little facetious, but going to heaven from the standpoint of Advaita Vedanta. Advaita is a little bit, let me say this. Advaita Vedanta is an outlier among Hindu traditions on this particular point. Important to know, when you compare Advaita Vedanta to other Hindu spiritual practices, Advaita Vedanta is an outlier on this particular point, and the particular point, by the way, is found in the Upanishads themselves, where the rishis point out that for your finite good deeds in this lifetime and in prior lifetimes, how can you possibly expect heaven to be anything but finite? This is Advaita Vedanta. And that is, even anything you enjoy is a finite enjoyment because it's based on finite effort. How can a finite effort lead to an infinite enjoyment? Makes sense. But that applies not only at a worldly level, but even at this religious level, at the level of going to heaven. So, according to Advaita Vedanta, going to heaven is temporary, and therefore, when your punya karmas are exhausted in heaven, you get reborn into some other condition. Could be another earthly condition, could be something else. And cockroach time. Anything is possible, but that establishes that heaven is not the goal, which, as I said, makes Advaita Vedanta's insistence on this, makes it a little bit of an, not a little bit, it is what it is. Many religious practices in the Hindu tradition are focused on accumulating good karma and going to heaven. And Shankara would turn it around and say, why are you doing all of that? Why not focus on the ultimate goal of life, what's called the Parama Purushartha, the ultimate goal of life, which is moksha. So that is the perspective. And I'll just mention in passing that both Dvaita Vedanta and Vishishta Advaita have different takes on this particular topic than Advaita. I don't think it's helpful to get into the details right now, but just put that in the back of your mind. Okay, so Sri Krishna says, na yati swarga narakao. Such a really a properly practicing karma yogi is obviously not going to heaven. Obviously not going to hell, but neither going to heaven. Then next. Asmin loke vartamanaha, asmin loke vartamanaha, swadharmasto nagha shuchihi, swadharmasto nagha shuchihi, jnanam vishuddham apnoti, jnanam vishuddham apnoti, madbhakti Vayadritshaya, madbhaktim Vayadritshaya. Asmin loke vartamanaha, describing the karma yogi who is vartamanaha, living asmin loke, in this world. What about that karma yogi? That yogi being swadharmastaha, same word we just saw in a prior verse. Swadharmastaha, established in doing one's own duties, but with the attitude of a karma yogi, not just fulfilling the duties. Therefore, anagha will not commit any sin, as the last line in the prior verse said. So if you are swadharmastaha, you won't commit a sin, ultimately. And shuchihi, the person is pure. And you can take this shuchihi as a little bit of a reference to this idea of being nishkama, not acting for the sake of a particular result, which is conventional life. Conventional life is you see something you want and you go after it. This is raga dvesha. You see what's desirable, you're compelled to chase after it. You see what is undesirable, you run away from it. Are animals any different? You know, that dog sees you with a snack in your hand and comes and I don't know, do dogs smile? I don't know. Anyway, the dog will certainly come and take the snack, but if you're holding a stick and looking very threatening, the dog will run away from you. How different are we? I know it sounds bad, but that's an accurate, in my view, an accurate, not in my view, in a spiritual point of view. From a spiritual point of view, if you are under the compulsion of raga and dvesha, you are no better than any other animal. Of course, human beings are animals, we're primates, but we do have something special. And if we are not making use of what is special, we reduce ourselves to the level of an animal. And what is special is discernment. An animal cannot discern in the way that human beings can discern. In particular, discernment between dharma and adharma. Okay, so by living this life of karma yoga, what is the consequence? Jnanam vishuddham apnoti. The person, the karma yogi, apnoti, gains vishuddham jnanam, pure spiritual knowledge, gaining enlightenment. Ultimately, look at this. Va, or madbhaktim, or gains devotion to me. This is the presentation that you will never find you won't find anywhere in the Bhagavad Gita. This is an approach unique to this Uddhava Gita, and is very much in keeping with the nature of the Bhagavata Purana. So the Bhagavata Purana is a very, very different kind of scripture than the Bhagavad Gita. We should not expect, as I said before, that consistency, that lockstep. Everything is absolutely identical. Bottom line is absolutely identical. The fundamental spiritual teachings are absolutely identical, not an iota of difference. But when it comes to spiritual practice, this goes all the way back to our adhikari bheda discussion. Different practices for different people. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna is teaching Arjuna. In the Uddhava Gita, Sri Krishna is teaching Uddhava. Arjuna and Uddhava are not the same person. So why would you expect, before this, doesn't every teacher do his or her best to address the students in front? That's the goal of the purpose of a teacher, is to teach whoever has come to be taught. So You have come to be taught, and I'm doing my best to address you in an appropriate way. Notice, in an appropriate way means you won't hear it here, but if you go to Rishikesh, you'll hear a lot of sannyasis talking about the importance of renouncing the world, taking sannyasa, and living in ashrams. That's what they'll tell you. They'll say, in fact, especially if they're a ardent follower of Shankaracharya, they will tell you, of course, you're not really, you're sitting there in class and you're a householder, and that sannyasi will address you and will say, of course you know that unless you renounce the world and take to a life of sannyasa, that you won't really be able to go all the way on this spiritual path. They'll just say that. I won't say that. My guru wouldn't say that, because it's not fitting for the particular audience. Adhikari Bheda. So in the same way, what Sri Krishna taught Arjuna was suitable for Arjuna. What Sri Krishna taught Uddhava was suitable for Uddhava. And there's going to be differences. Those differences are not inconsistencies. Those differences are evidence of this adhikari bheda. Different teachings, different practices to meet the individual needs of individual practitioners. Okay, enough said. So therefore, he talks about that karma yoga will prepare you for either apnoti jnanam vishuddham, with the preparation of living a life of karma yoga, either, that va in the last line, either you can gain the spiritual wisdom, va, or madbhaktim, or you can gain this devotion to me, yadrichaya. If you are blessed, and here we see the emphasis, typical in the Bhagavata Purana, the emphasis on bhakti. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's a little bit more even-handed when Sri Krishna is talking, but just a little bit more in this adhikari Veda. This is a very confusing topic for many people, so allow me to elaborate just for a moment. In the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 3, Sri Krishna says, karma yoga is the best. In chapter 2, he says jnana is the best. In chapter 12, he says bhakti is the best. In chapter 6, he says dhyana, meditation is best. Is Sri Krishna being inconsistent? You get it now. This is adhikari bheda. Different teachings meant for different people. So there's a little bit more even treatment, let me say, of all these different practices. Bhagavata Purana is not so evenly distributed. There's a tremendous emphasis on bhakti throughout the Bhagavata Purana, including in this Uddhava Gita, which is one of the reasons the Uddhava Gita is such a wonderful text. It's really focused on bhakti. So he says that when you have performed karma yoga, you become prepared. This is what I said, that jnana and bhakti are at the upper tier. Karma yoga can prepare you for jnana. Karma yoga can prepare you for bhakti. And when you have this jnana or bhakti, you are on the threshold of enlightenment, which we can describe, and what Sri Krishna himself describes as discovering Sri Krishna within you as your true nature. That discovery is the result of jnana, or the result of, Sri Krishna says, mad bhakti, that devotion. Whatever it is being led to the threshold via jnana or via bhakti, being led to the threshold of self-discovery. is a good way of putting it. I think I gave the metaphor the other, may have been in the last class. Many paths, in fact, this is Pujya Swamiji's metaphor. There are many paths up the mountain. In this case, two paths up the mountain, jnana and bhakti. But Pujya Swamiji says at the top of the mountain there's a temple, and the temple has one entry facing east. So you can take various paths up the mountain, various spiritual practices, but one door into the temple represents being on the threshold of self-discovery. To discover your true divine nature is enlightenment, regardless of how you arrive at the threshold of that discovery. Okay, enough said. Now, do we want to do that further? No, I think that's good. I'm just looking at my there's all this scribbling here, and I'm looking at it and saying, yay. Which means I'm arguing with whom? Myself. That's right. Okay, I'll just proceed. The next three verses, let me just give an overview here. Something also, a very nice point, he says in these three verses, the uniqueness and value of a human life, a human birth. And Sri Krishna needs to tell not just Uddhava this important message, but he needs to tell all of us, because we take it for granted. We take so much for granted. Imagine, and just to use a current example, suppose you were living in the eastern part of Ukraine, or if you were living in Gaza, wondering when the next bomb is going to fall on your head. There are not hundreds or thousands, there are at least hundreds of thousands of people living. Actually, there are several million people living in Gaza. Do we worry about such things? And do we take that absence of worry for granted? That's my point, which is to introduce these three verses in which Sri Krishna is going to describe the tremendous value of this human life. Let's see how he says. Swargino pietamichanti, Swargino pietamichanti, Lokam nirayanastata, Lokam nirayanastata, Sadakam jnana bhaktibhyam, Sadakam jnana bhaktibhyam, Ubhayam tarasarakam, Ubhayam tarasarakam. Etam lokam icchanti. Etam lokam, this world, this human life, icchanti, they desire. Who desires this human life? Swarginaha, those who dwell in heaven desire this worldly life? What? What is he saying? Well, if you remember my prior comment, you can understand. It is absolutely true that in Swarga, you suffer not at all. So in Swarga, and they know it. They know that if they had a earthly human life, they would suffer more. But then why do they icchanti? Why do they desire etam lokam, this human life? Because they also know their time in Swarga is limited. It's like, I've given the metaphor, it's like going on a vacation. You go to some wonderful resort, you enjoy it all, but you know you're only there for 7 days. 5 days are over, 6 days are over. And then your last day has come. You have to pack up your bags and you head off to the airport. It's over. And those who dwell in heaven know that their heavenly life, which is absolutely a life of enjoyment, but they know it is finite. Therefore, they icchanti etam lokam, they desire this life, not only, and by the way, the point where we're going, just so you get the context right, they enjoy this, they want this life because in this life you can gain moksha. We'll come back to that point in just a moment. But not only do those in Swarga want a human birth, but obviously, nirayanaha, those who dwell in hell, tata, in the same way. Obviously, they don't want to suffer in hell. They want this human life because enlightenment is possible only as a human being. Why? You've heard this before. Why? Is it dogma? It's because the Bhagavata Purana says so. You can only get enlightened as a human being. There's Shruti Yukti Anubhava. Everything is supported. Not everything in Scripture is supported by both reasoning and experience. And here Sri Krishna gives the support. He says, why is it that you can only gain enlightenment in human life? Because sadhakam jnana bhaktibhyam. Because human life enables you, sadhakam, enables you to gain jnana and bhakti, which we saw in a prior verse was standing on the threshold of that temple at the top of the mountain, on the threshold of discovering that inner divinity, the truth of who you are. So how do you gain jnana and bhakti? Through karma yoga. Well, look at the logic here. So he says, let's get the context right. Human life alone, in a human life alone, can you reach moksha? Why? And the answer is, in human life alone, you can practice karma yoga to become prepared for jnana and bhakti, which leads you to that threshold. But notice, if you don't live a human life, you can't practice karma yoga, therefore you can't gain jnana and bhakti, therefore you can't reach the threshold. You're with me so far? It's just a logical sequence. And then the last part we have to pick up, and why is it that you can only practice karma yoga as a human being? That's not too hard to understand. In fact, only as a human being can you perform karma. Remember, our definition of karma is an intentional act. An accidental act or a mindless act is not karma. What you do intentionally is not an act. Can animals act with this kind of human will and intention? No. How about if you were in heaven? Do you know, this is what is taught. If you ask me, Swamiji, what is it like to be in heaven? How should I know? Yeah. But don't ask me. But then who can you ask? Anyway, we do find some teachings in scriptures which suggests what it might be like. Imagine a life where you're perfectly content. If you're perfectly content, there's no necessity for intentional action. According to the doctrine of karma, both heaven and hell are periods of time in which you only exhaust past karmas without incurring any new karmas. This is a very conventional way of understanding the doctrine of karma, heaven and hell are merely for the sake of exhausting past karmas. You do not accumulate new karmas. And you don't accumulate new karmas because you don't have intentionality, because of that state of in heaven, that state of perfection; in hell, the state of utter helplessness. You're just suffering helplessly. So, intentionality is only for human beings, meaning karma is only for human beings, meaning karma yoga is only for human beings, which prepares you for jnana and bhakti, which leads you to the threshold of the temple on top of the mountain. So notice that this reasoning, and in fact, let's just finish this verse. Sri Krishna concludes by saying, Ubhayam tat asadakam. Ubhayam, both life and heaven and hell, are tat asadakam, are not going to help you perform, will not enable you to perform karma yoga. Living in heaven and hell won't enable you to perform karma yoga, meaning you won't get prepared for jnana and bhakti, meaning you won't get to the threshold of that discovery, only as a human being. So the reasoning that Sri Krishna himself gives is very solid. It's not dogma to say that only human beings can gain enlightenment. It's supported by lots of reasoning. By the way, this is also why it's commonly said, in fact, in the Bhagavata Purana itself, it's commonly said that human life is rare. It is one of what they say 84 lakh yonis. There are 8.4 million different forms in which you could be born, with cockroach down near the bottom, heaven up at the top, earthly life someplace in the middle, but this earthly life is the only one. What are your chances? 1 in 8.4 million are your chances of gaining this human life. Okay, continuing. Nanara swargitam kankshen, nanara swargitam kankshen, narikim vavichakshanaha, narakim vavichakshanaha, nemam lokam chakanksheta, nemam lokam chakanksheta, deha veshat pramadyati. Deha veshat pramadyati. Naraha, a person, na kangshet, a person who does not desire swargatim, going to heaven, narakim va, who's going to desire going to hell? So you have to supply something. Someone who doesn't desire to go to heaven, or someone who doesn't desire to avoid hell. So we can supply that. So one who doesn't desire to go to heaven or to avoid hell, why? Temporary. We're talking about someone who is vichakshanaha, someone who has the discernment that anything that you achieve through finite means is a finite achievement, including heaven. So therefore, this vichakshanaha, this wise person who has this discernment, na imam lokam cha kangsheta. This discerning person, na kangsheta, would not desire imam lokam, this world. So not the heavenly world, not even this world, will give worldly efforts. You've heard me say this before. No amount of worldly efforts will ever culminate in perfect contentment and inner peace. You've heard that before. So therefore, the person avoids getting entangled in this worldly life, and Sri Krishna puts it very clearly, Deha aveshat pramadyati. Deha aveshat. When you inhabit a physical body, actually not just a physical body, subtle body, mind will be included here, such a person, pramadyati, will be deluded, meaning will come under the sway of this raga and dvesha. Remember our example of the dog? Going after the snack and avoiding the stick. This is raga and dvesha. When a carrot and stick, we become pawns of our own desires, these inner compulsions, raga and dvesha. This next verse concludes this topic really nicely, so let us see that last verse. Etad vidvan pura mrityor, etad vidvan pura mrityor, abhavaya ghate tasaha, abhavaya ghate tasaha, apramatta hidam jnatva, apramatta hidam jnatva, martyam apyartha siddhidam, martyam apyartha siddhidam. Vidwan. Prior verse, vichakshanaha. This wise, discerning person. And there are different kinds of wise people and discerning people. This is specifically someone who has discerned the futility of worldly efforts to gain perfect peace and contentment. Someone who has even discerned the futility of religious efforts to gain perfect peace and contentment. Going to heaven, right? Doing rituals, etc., to go to heaven. So one who is vichakshanaha, or vidvan here, is one who has discerned the futility of finite, makes sense, one who has discerned the futility of finite effort to have an infinite result. You don't have to be a genius to figure that out. And an interesting point here is, do you desire perfect contentment and inner peace, or partial contentment and inner peace? Isn't that interesting? We don't want partial. Which means if we're seeking perfect contentment and inner peace, aren't we seeking a perfect goal, an infinite goal? An infinite goal which would presumably require an infinite effort. Make sense? Okay. This is discernment. So one who has this discernment, we have a special word for such a person, a word that applies to all of you. It is mumukshu. One who wants liberation more than worldly or religious results. So mumukshu is one who has given up worldly pursuit, not given up, one who is not fixated on worldly goals, one who is not fixated on religious goals, one who is intent on spiritual goals. That is a mumukshu, that discerning person. So etat, vidwan, this enlightened person, not enlightened, discerning person, I should stay with the same words, this discerning person, etad vidwan, knowing this, knowing the futility of worldly efforts and religious efforts to culminate in a state of perfection, this mumukshu, this discerning person, pura mrityoho, before dying, saha gateta, that person should strive for abhavaya. By the way, don't misunderstand, it's not striving for abhava. Abhava is non-existence. No one's going to strive for non-existence. This is not abhava, it is abhava. And bhava is a word used for samsara, worldly existence. So this person, gateta, should strive abhavaya for freedom from samsara, freedom from being stuck in this loop. When you are born with raga dvesha, if you don't overcome those raga dveshas, you get born again with raga dvesha, unless you're born in heaven or hell. But if you're born, by the way, do cockroaches have raga dvesha? They seem to, right? They go for things, I don't know what they, don't ask me. They go for certain things, they avoid certain things, like any critter will do that. So all animals and insects and even plants, I suppose plants will turn towards the sun. So all living things are driven by raga, dvesha, with that exception of being in heaven or hell, for the reasons we said before. And when your life is driven by raga dvesha, then you're going to be reborn with raga dvesha and reborn with raga dvesha. It goes on and on and on, perhaps interrupted by a time in heaven or hell, but anyway, stuck in the loop. Therefore, that person, saha gateta, should strive for abhavaya, freedom from the cycle of birth and followed by rebirth and rebirth. And idam jnatva, having understood idam, this, that this what? Idam, last line, martyamapi. Even though this body is mortal. Very interesting observation Sri Krishna says here. Even though this body is mortal, 2 verses ago he said, any other body won't allow you to gain moksha. Only in this human body, that 1 in 8.4 million chance, this is your lottery chances. By the way, in a lottery, your odds are a lot worse than that. It's not 1 in 8.4 million, I don't know what it is, but your odds of winning a $100 million lottery are far less, probably thousands of times less likely than being struck by lightning. That's right. I'm not making this up. You can work on the numbers for yourself or find someone who has. Anyway, our point here is you have won this lottery, 1 out of 8.4 million. You have a human birth. Only in a human birth can you perform karma yoga, can you gain jnana or bhakti, and arrive at the threshold of enlightenment. So only in a human birth. So the discerning person, jnatva idam martyam, having understood that this body is mortal, that person also, there's another meaning here, that person apramattaha should be unwavering, should not be scatterbrained in any way at all. Apramattaha literally should not be misled in any way. That person should be remaining vigilant. That's a good translation. That person should be absolutely vigilant, knowing that idam martyam, that this body, which is mortal, artha siddhidam, can lead to artha here means parama purushartha, the ultimate goal of life, moksha. This human life can lead to moksha, but also knowing that idam martyam, this body is mortal, meaning time is running out, as it were. Time is running out, and this Bhartrahari, this great poet from ancient times, had this most delightful expression in one verse of a poem in his Vairagya Shatakam, his 100 verses on Vairagya. And some of you have heard me use this example before. He says, I'll paraphrase it. Sanskrit is very elegant. I'll paraphrase it in English. He says that when your house is burning down, it's too late to dig a well. Remember, in ancient times, there were no fire departments, fire engines. So if your house is burning, what do? You go to the well and get some water. You get buckets of water, and you pour it on the house, and hopefully you can put out the fire. But if you have no well, and your house is on fire, it's too late. And the point here is well taken, and that is, this body is mortal. It has, like when you go to the market, in the grocery market, every item has an use before date. Our bodies and minds have a use before date. By the way, mind also, right? What about dementia? Your mind might expire before your body does. Or your body might expire before your mind does. There's no rule. And we don't know which will expire first. We don't know when they will expire, which means apramattaha bhava. It means that you should be remain vigilant. Remain vigilant means remain dedicated to seeking the goal. The ultimate goal of life is paramapurushartha, moksha. You've got that 1 out of 8.4 million advantage right now. And Sri Krishna's point here is, don't squander it. Human life should not be squandered in this way. To live like that dog, governed by raga dvesha, is to squander this life. Don't squander it, Sri Krishna concludes. Okay, good place to conclude for today. Tomorrow, Sunday, we have our Vedanta class. At 10 o'clock, Shankara's wonderful teachings, followed by Satsanga, question and answer at 11. Please come and join us, and we'll conclude with our prayers. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Gaving Gavinam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatahana Shranvan Utabasira Saranam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururhatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramhanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat.